Hello, everybody. Happy end of April. And if you've been following along, you know that this month we've been talking a lot about mental health and mindfulness. And I'm super excited to round out our conversation with Dr. Lauren Pasqua from Connections Child and Family Center down in the Woodlands Spring, Texas area. So, good morning, Dr. Pasqua. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Anytime that we can bring in mental health professionals, I don't think that we can ever talk too much about mental health, whether we're talking about supporting the kids or really where we're going today about prioritizing parental mental health. Like there's just still such a stigma. It's gotten better, but there's still such a stigma about seeking support for mental health. I love having professionals on to talk about how we support families as much as possible. So, can you give us a little bit actually about your background and how you came to be so crazy passionate about supporting parents and prioritizing their mental health first? Then we'll get into that.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been practicing for the last 15 years and have a group practice in the Woodlands area. My team specializes in working with kids, teens, and families. And we are
Mhm.
especially passionate about helping parents build validating and change-ready environments, and helping them recognize how important their mental health is in creating health for their teen.
So before we get to that, you made a comment or you just used a phrase that struck me that I'd like us to dig into a little bit deeper if we can. You said
Sure.
helping parents create validating and change ready environments. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more, please.
Sure. So I can try to dig into that a little bit. So validating environment, meaning that parents are being very intentional in
Mhm.
uh, noticing, paying attention, and supporting their kids and their emotional well-being, their emotion, expressing their emotions, um, understanding and acknowledging the kid's perspective, even if the parent doesn't agree or
Mhm.
it doesn't align. Validation doesn't equal agreement. It just means acknowledgement, acceptance, understanding.
So what you're saying is the don't you cry or I'll give you something to cry about is not part of a validating environment, right?
Definitely not. And I would say a lot of times those kinds of statements are made in a situation where the parent may not understand why a child is feeling a particular way, or they
Mhm.
themselves feel very triggered when their child is emotional or upset.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, there's a lot of
Just
symbiosis and connection between parent and child.
absolutely. So then that's the validating. What do you mean by
Mhm.
change ready?
So I think a lot of families come in to see us and it's sort of like they want to do drive-by therapy. Hey, I'm going to drop my kid off and then I'm going to take off and I want you to fix them because they're the problem and they just need to be fixed. Um, but the reality is kids are not growing up in a vacuum, and we can't give a kid tools and help them become more self-aware, more emotionally regulated, and then send them back to the same environment where maybe the parents don't have the same skills, or maybe
Mhm.
they don't know how to support or encourage the kid in using their skills. So
Right.
that's what I mean by change ready. The parents have to go first. We have to get parents in a state where they have skills to regulate their emotions, to tolerate distress, to stay present in the moment and parent from a mindful
Mhm.
place, a regulated and mindful place. Once that is in place, then the environment is ready for change, and the kid can be integrated into the treatment, and hopefully, then the parent will have the tools that they need to help the child use what they're learning in therapy, and help them to
Sure.
make change. Yeah.
Sure. So that is a perfect lead in, I'm guessing, as to why you are such an advocate and a believer in the
Yeah.
concept that parent mental health has to come first. Because I can only imagine, for example, what my own dear mother's response might have been to hearing you describe this validating and change ready environment.
Yeah.
Um, I imagine she's been gone for 4.5 years, so I can't ask her at this point, but I have to imagine that she might have been rather triggered by that.
Mhm.
Were we ever in a situation where she was like, here, fix my kid? Right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I believe she had a tough time acknowledging or asking for help. And so I imagine she's probably not alone. There's a lot of parents who are probably like, I'm doing the best I can, and that's just all you're going to get from me, or some variation thereof, right?
Yeah, and I would say I agree. Parents are doing the best they can with the tools they have and the knowledge they have at this moment. And
Mhm.
we can all do better, and we should. There is nothing else on earth that refines us the way that parenting does.
I can only imagine. I watch some of my friends because, full disclosure, anyone who's tuning in for the first time, my husband and I have not opted to go down the route of having children of our own. We always joke, we're like, people are like, how come you don't have kids? And we're like, because we have yours. And we lovingly and respectfully return them to you. And I watch some of my friends who have kids who are just like I look at what my response would be in a situation, and I see a lot of my mom because I haven't had the opportunities to learn different things. I haven't had the need to learn different things in a parent child realm. So
Yeah.
then how does the mental health fit into that? I know that you've said um that you prioritize parental mental health above the kids. Where do we go from here in this conversation?
Sure. So I find a lot of times parents come in and like I said, there's a lot of this push for drive-by therapy. Fix my kid, I'm going to leave and come back and they're going to be all fixed. Or a lot of times when we do, mention to parents, "Hey, would you like some support? What is your self-care? Where is your mental health?" There are a lot of parents who are increasingly stating, "Yes, I'm struggling. Yes, I would could use support, but I'll get help after my teen is stable." So they're
Mm,
flipping it, right? They're
okay.
focusing all of their time, money, energy, and resources help my kid, which is a normal, I think, response for parents in any scenario. We want our kids to be thriving, we want them to survive, be healthy, and we would give the shirt off our back to make that happen. I think that the problem, though, is that again, we're turning that kid to the same environment with a parent that doesn't have the tools, isn't going to actually make the change that they're looking for, and so it can
Mhm.
sometimes be a waste of resources. Uh,
Mm,
and so this wait and see attitude, like I can wait, I'll be okay, I can, like you said, push through, I'm gonna pull myself up. Sometimes it actually prolongs the whole
mhm.
scenario from improving, and treatment
Right.
takes longer, uh, or doesn't reach the improvement that they had originally intended.
So if a parent is sitting here going, okay, this is all fine and well, I can't afford therapy for me and my kid, or whatever the challenges are. I mean, you hear the pushback that you get from parents. Where do they start to care for their own mental health? Because obviously, seeking professional insight from a certified psychologist, psychiatrist, therapist, right? Like there are those kinds of resources, and I'm sure those are part of your recommendation. What else can they do if they're in that very real situation where maybe they can't, maybe their kid's close to crisis, or maybe their kid's immediately post crisis, and their kid very much definitely needs that professional support? How do they work those things in for themselves?
So I think that's a very valid question, and one that I definitely want to answer. But I also want to just make sure to provide a little bit of data to back up my personal
Sure.
statement, because I think
Yeah.
that can be really valuable. So there has been some research on this, and in recent research, even in Harvard in 2022, conducted two nationally representative surveys with teens and young adults and parents and caregivers. And in their study, they found that depressed teens are 5 times more likely than non-depressed teens to have a depressed parent. And anxious teens are about three
Wow.
times more likely than non anxious teens to have a depressed parent. About 40% of the teens that they surveyed, even if they weren't depressed or anxious themselves, also reported being at least somewhat worried about the mental health of one of their parents. So, as you can
Mm,
see, this is really this is a real issue. This is really something that shows some real validity that we need to be focusing on and prioritizing. So, if a parent, I'm going to be really honest, if a parent had the resources to choose to send their kid to therapy or to participate in some kind of therapeutic parenting approach, I think I would pick the parenting approach because the parent learns the tools to help their kid. They become the tool themselves with those
Right,
skills that they are gathering and
right,
learning.
right. So that makes me, I thought that I just had two thoughts related to this. I think as adults, we tend to underestimate the sensitivity and awareness that the kids in our worlds have. We
Absolutely.
tend to, I just saw this happen with a friend of mine recently where one of her kiddos, she's anxious about something, mom is anxious about something. One of her kiddos was starting to pick up on it. And mom's perspective was that the kid was acting out and just being difficult. And
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to go, wait a second, as kind of an outside observer, what if he's actually picking up on your stress,
Mhm.
which brought on a whole host of other issues, right?
Right. Then there's
But
lots of feelings of guilt and shame that come up.
exactly, which I was like, no, that's not there. I'm just reflecting. But I had another friend recently who, so number one, we underestimate our kids' sensitivities to it.
Mhm.
But number two, not only are they sensitive, but they're going to behave accordingly. To your point of they are concerned about the parents' well-being. Um,
Absolutely.
this other parent that I was speaking with recently has kiddos in that preteen, like tween area. And one of the kiddos said to her, like, she was like, well, how come you didn't tell me about blah, blah, blah? And the kiddo said, Mom, you're so busy. You didn't have time to hear it. I didn't want to bother you.
Right. Yeah, I don't wanna burden you.
Well, exactly. And
Mhm.
so I think just from my anecdotal experience, literally in the last week, underscores or adds to your point of the scientific data
Mhm.
of like those are real examples of how I have seen that data in the last 7 days in my world with families of different ages where like the kids are noticing these things. And I love that your perspective of like if we can help the parents on their end, it will decrease the stress in the home, but it will also, I like the way that you said that the parent then becomes the tool.
Absolutely. Yes, the parent is already a mediator of the child's emotional state. And really it's
Mhm,
bidirectional. So to your point, adolescents, teens, preteens, kids, they're all very attuned to their parents'
mhm,
emotional states. And if a parent
mhm,
has unresolved emotional issues, a high level of
mhm,
stress, they're going to pick up on that and they're going to
mhm.
respond to it, sometimes in a negative way. But
Sure.
bidirectionally, I think it is also important to point out that there are some kids that are more challenging to parent. And when a
Sure.
child has ADHD or autism or anxiety or depression, then of course it does increase the stress of parenting, which can then increase the difficulties the parent is having with their mental health. So
Mhm.
there is an influence and it goes both ways.
Sure thing. Sure thing. Thank you for pausing to bring that data in. I think that's compelling to underscore your point of like if you have the resources to only seek insight for one or support for one at this point, prioritize the parent.
Mhm.
And then what are some other ways then that we can work more of that in?
Sure. So I mean, I think of course, as a professional, I really value therapy, professional support. And I also recognize that that's not the only way that we can care for ourselves as humans, as parents. And that's not the only way we can learn or grow in our knowledge. So I
Mhm.
want to just caveat that, like, there's many ways to get that knowledge and support, and there's many things parents could be building into their life just to care for their own mental health and their own stability without seeking professional support. So
Mhm.
that's a good place to start, is to really assess, okay, what am I doing right now to prioritize my emotional state? How am I
Mhm.
managing my stress? Do I have any regular habits in place that help me to manage my stress? Are there areas where I feel really chaotic or unorganized and that is causing me to have more stress?
Mhm.
So I think doing an assessment of that and then starting with the basics, right? Like, what is making a routine, a schedule that feels manageable. Um, creating some structure around repetitive and boring tasks like meal planning or laundry, or the things that just really drag us down. And then from there, figuring out where you might be able to build in small moments of self-care activities, and prioritizing particularly things that are going to be helpful for your physical health, getting enough sleep. I'm big on the basics. Getting some
Mhm.
sunlight to increase your vitamin D, which is like, nature's antidepressant. Getting
Mhm.
regular physical activity, even if it's just walking the dog around the block. Um, Even better, doing some physical activity with your kids so that they're also
Mhm.
getting this benefit, right, of moving their body.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think starting with those simple things can be really helpful. And I would venture to say, based on my own experience as a parent, that we don't even do that. Not only we're not
Mhm.
seeking mental health support from a professional, but we're also not even really looking at how can we care for ourselves when we're in a feeling of crisis with our kids. Right.
Sure. Well, and so often, again, like I've seen so many parents as well who are like, I've got to put my kid first,
Hmm.
but there's got to be, you've got to fill those coffers. Like there's only so much that you can pour, and it sounds really cliche. Like you can't pour from an empty cup. Okay,
But
great.
it's
You can't pour
true.
from an empty cup, but it's true,
It
you
is
know?
true.
So
Yeah.
I mean, for, going back to what you talked about earlier, like the mom guilt and the shame, there's a lot of moms I know who feel like taking that time for themselves is taking time away from their kids, or away
Hmm.
from, maybe not directly time with their kids, but time that could be spent doing something for their kids,
Hmm.
right? How
Yes.
do we help them bridge that gap? Because you and I can sit here on the outside of the family and be like, no, but it's the basics, you got to do it. Like,
Hmm.
how do we help them? What's a reframe that we can offer them to be like, no, this really is actually for your kids?
Yes. I mean, I would say if you do it and you come back and you notice, I actually feel a little bit more, clear headed. I feel like I can tolerate a little bit more just chaos in the home. I'm actually feeling a little bit more stable, and I can respond in a way that is more aligned with my values and how I want to be parenting. Then I think it will show you that this is really needed. It and it works. It really
Right.
does work.
So it sounds to me that it's really a matter of just try the thing once and observe how things, and it's maybe it's going to be monumental change, but not necessarily. But if you recognize that you last 5 seconds longer before you blow your stack, that's
Yeah.
progress,
It is progress. I
you
would
know?
say try it for a week. It takes uh 7 to 9 times to build a habit at least. So we need to give it a little time and really see. And you don't have to do everything at once. Picking one or two small changes can
Hmm.
can be really helpful. Um, and then just kind of go from there. Beyond that, other things parents can do, it could be things like learning how to practice some gratitude or some mindfulness,
Hmm.
um, focusing a little bit more on the present and being present. I think as a parent, we're always thinking, what's going to happen next? Oh my gosh, that thing that happened yesterday. And you're just never really grounded in the moment. There's always a total narrative going on in your mind, and just
Hmm.
cycling through worries.
Hmm. Can we dig into gratitude a little bit, Dr. Pasqua? Because I
Sure.
hear a ton about it, just in the people that I engage with. I know that gratitude, or gratitude practice, or gratitude journal, expressing gratitude to others as well. I know, and I've seen it in my life, that it has a positive impact. What's the science behind it? And what's the psychology behind why gratitude is so valuable?
Well, so I'm not going to go into the neurotransmitter changes, but I think if we can take a moment and pause, then and reflect what's going well, right? And instead of only focusing on the negative, then we're going to naturally emphasize that in our mind over time. Um,
Hmm.
I was just reading this statement someone was making, hypothesizing that part of the reason that there is an increase in anxiety and depression is that many rituals that were part of, like, say, religious organizations have not been replaced in the secular world. So things like prayer, contemplation, reflection, um, celebrating milestones and coming together to grieve or be as a community. Many of these things are kind of missing in the secular world, or they haven't been completely replaced. But what really caught my interest about that was the comment about prayer and contemplation and reflection. And really, when we say gratitude, that's what we're talking about. It's really a space
Mm-hmm.
to be and to reflect,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Which in today's like rush and run crazy world, we don't pause to be. We're always thinking about the next 300,000 things on the to-do list, or where the
Yeah.
kids need to be shuffled and how quickly they need to be shuffled. And especially if we're talking to single parents or solo parents, if there isn't a co-parent involved, there's just a lot of logistics, and it does take up a lot of brain space. And I can see that also being something where people are like, I don't have the freaking time for that. But even like 30 seconds can make a difference. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just even less than that, just a regular kind of thought. Oh, okay, this went well today. Like, I'm grateful for that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and celebrating our wins, because I think we have a tendency as a society to spend a lot of time thinking about what's not going well
Mm-hmm.
and really giving a lot of our attention and energy to the things that we're unhappy about or that we're feeling guilty about or worried about. But where we put our attention is what grows. So much like
Yep.
a plant, if we have a plant and we give it lots of water and we give it lots of sunlight, it's going to grow. But the other
Yeah.
plant, if we ignore it and we don't pay attention to it, over time it kind of withers away.
Right.
And so if you imagine that you're giving all your attention to the negatives, the things that aren't
Mm-hmm.
going well, obviously that's going to grow and it's going to seem bigger.
Right. Right. Well, and that's also something that, if you sit down for family dinner, even once a week, hey, what went well this week? What are some
Yeah.
positives? I know in college, I was in an organization where at our chapter meetings each week, we'd have an event or a share opportunity called Roses and Thorns or Petals and
Uh-huh.
Thorns,
I
where it
love
was like,
that.
what are the good things that came out of this week? What do whether you're proud of something, or you just had something good happen, or you got a care
Mhm.
package from mom and dad, or what are the thorns? Like, what are the things that you're struggling with? And it was not everybody had to share every time, but they could share up to one of each. And that way we also knew that if somebody was struggling with something, we just had something to support them. So maybe there's something like that if you're listening in that, could be just a little, to your point, like a ritual that you create in
Mhm.
your own home, even if you have those those rituals in a religious sense in your family or in your place of worship. Why not incorporate them at home along the way?
Yeah, I've had a lot of families enjoy bringing in a high and low kind of comment at their meals or their gatherings as a family each day, even before bed, whatever might work for your family. Everybody goes around and says a high for the day and a low for the day. And even better, if this can start being modeled by parents to express the emotion they felt with
Mhm.
that high or
Mhm.
low, bringing it
Yeah.
back to the parental mental health, the kid mental health. Um, by modeling. I was feeling
Yeah.
really sad today. I was feeling really frustrated today. I was feeling really worried today.
That's interesting. And I want to dig into that, and then we'll probably wrap this up. You're talking about modeling emotional observation and regulation for kids. I grew up in an environment, and I know many of my peers did, where mom or dad they were very stoic and they didn't have emotions, or they had the perception that because I'm the adult, I can't have these hard feelings because I have to keep it together. I'm the
Mhm.
responsible one. I just have to keep going.
Right, right.
What's your
Yeah,
take on that
I
relative to
I'm
sharing with kids?
yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there is some cultural norms around the expression and identification of emotions. Um, and I think if we want to raise children that can regulate their emotions and tolerate distress, loss,
Hmm.
change, disappointment, we have to start with helping them know what they are feeling. And
Sure.
if they don't know what they're feeling, then they definitely can't regulate their emotions. And if parents don't know what they're feeling, then they can't regulate their emotions. It's the same.
Bingo. Hmm.
So,
Awesome.
yep.
Go ahead. You're going to wrap with one more thought.
Nope, that was it. That's good.
Okay. Because we could clearly talk all day about this. There are many,
For
many, many
sure.
rabbit holes we could go down about this. So,
Absolutely.
Dr. Pasqua, if somebody is in your area, what's the best way for them to find you? If they're like, hey, I want to learn more about her or about the Connections Children and Family Center and your practice and such, where do they go? What kind of services do y'all offer?
Sure. So my group practices website is Connections Child and Family Center, and we offer a variety of individual, family, couples, and group therapy sessions. One of the things that I think would be really useful for your listeners to know is that we actually offer a DBT skills class for parents that teaches parents many of the skills that we just talked about today, about mindfulness, about distress tolerance and emotional regulation, plus more, and how they can use that to be more effective in their parenting. And that is actually a class that's open to anyone because it is a class versus actual therapy.
Awesome. Can you take a minute and define DBT?
Sure, sure. Yeah, absolutely. To me, DBT is life skills, but technically, if we really wanted the technical definition, it means dialectical behavior therapy. And it was developed initially as a full therapeutic approach for folks who were really struggling with more extreme emotional dysregulation or self harm behaviors. But since its inception in the 80s, many research studies have been done and found that the skills are really life skills, things that
Got it.
everybody needs, and they help anybody of any age.
And that is actually where we're going to pause this part of our conversation and where we are going to pick up our conversation for members of the Parent Tween Village. We are going to be talking about what is DBT. We're going to redefine it, dig in a little bit more. We're going to talk about how mindfulness fits in. And we're going to talk about how parents can use that in their homes. And again, more modeling and being the tool, as you talked about earlier. So if you are a member of Parent Tween Village, make sure that you look for the conversation uploaded here in the next week or so. And if you're not yet a part of Parent Tween Village, pop on over to parenttweenconnection.com, click on the menu and explore Parent Tween Village, and you can join us. Dr. Pasqua, is there anything you want to wrap up by saying today before we head out?
I just really want to, invite the parents who might be listening or the other adults who know parents to really provide that reflection and that support and encouragement to prioritize their own mental health. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain.
And there's the joy of dogs in my background. So with that, we're going to wrap up. I'm going to say, Dr. Pasqua, thank you so much for your time. And we'll see you shortly.
Thank you.